San Antonio, Texas. Well, here we are again, San Antonio, and it's me, Fidel Castillo. I don't know if you guys knew it. They call me Two Bears. We're the Irritila clan of the Coahuiltecan Nation here in San Antonio. But the reason I'm here today, it's a special prayer. And, today is March the 11th, and 2016, and today we're burying a very beautiful young lady, Mrs. Nancy Reagan. So I want to take a moment of silence out for Nancy Reagan and the indigent children, my son and the indigent children of Texas. New course in America, please. A lot of things I brought to you guys, and that's been happening. My son's issue is probably one of the most important issues I've advocated for ever in my lifetime. And I think on my last show, you guys had seen the ESP Project, Building America's Future, with Emmett Smith referencing to our veterans. The reason why our veterans had committed suicide on that 2012 Department of Veterans Affairs suicide report was due to psychotropics. And we had gone to speak with Captain Hunter Smith there at Camp Mayberry. He got the appointment for Governor Perry in 2013, and he was there for PTSD, and we asked him if he can open up the language. And what we found why our men were killing themselves was because of psychotropics, and he said he couldn't because he was still with the government. And we're going to keep advocating as far as, back on Father's Day of 2009, as far as, why I'm on my mission today, and, what I'm hoping for, and with your help, we can make this change. 2009 on Father's Day, I had gone to the Cindy Taylor Cryer Juvenile Treatment Center here in San Antonio. They had taken my son there after he had absconded from the Shamar Haven of Hope in Houston, and we're trying to find out what happened there as far as why he had to leave. On that Father's Day, I had gone there to visit, and they had taken me to the back room. As far as why they had taken me to the back room, when they brought my son in, he had been put on a psychotropic drug called Prozac, and he didn't really have control of himself. He was rolling, and I grabbed him, and he started crying and saying that he doesn't get out unless he takes this drug. He was trying to help the kids that were withdrawing from psychotropics, and the mod leader got upset with him because he's not capable of helping them, because he's not certified or capable of intervening when there's a chemical altering of a child's mind. And it seems to be a process that is being discussed today, in 2015. This was, of course, back in 2009. Well, 4 men pushed their way in and put him in restraints and took him to isolation. And they told him he's not getting out of isolation unless he takes a drug called Prozac. And that's what they had him on. And I told him, don't take it anymore. I'm going to find somebody to help get you out of here. And he didn't, but it seemed like the damage was done. But it was even more shocking when I went to ask the director as to why she chemically altered my son's mind. She sort of laughed in my face and said I didn't have any rights. They had consent to do this, and I needed to leave. And I left, and was crying, and just I couldn't believe this. They altered my son's mind. And I got down on my knees that day, and I asked God, to help me, to eradicate this this process. For me, is a crime against humanity. And it's a process in the Texas Juvenile Justice Department that we need to, come together to end. And that's what my mission is here today. That's why I'm doing this show here with you. I'm going to march to ask the governor to meet with the Native American Nations Council that I had founded here in San Antonio on a new course. This can't be the process of justice in America for what Senator Whitmire said was indigent children. And I had advocated for the Annie E. Casey Foundation to try to start the Juvenile Detention Alternative Initiative model site in San Antonio. And I was working with the advocates and working on different approaches to try to protect the children in the juvenile system. That was, of course, the Texas Juvenile Justice Department, but they didn't adopt that model site with the Caseys. And Mr. McCarthy recently, and I'll let you watch this, was on TEDx, and he talked about it's time that we imagine that we have shut down youth imprisonment in America. I can't see how this is going to make us a prosperous country if we're at war with our own children. And that's sort of what I'm writing, why I'm here today with you guys. We are at war with our children. When I did the assessment, it was 7 single-parent moms, myself, and 2 sets of parents. And then one set of parents, young man, ended up killing his father. And it was a juvenile judge, Lisa Jarrett. She was going to make the decision on whether this kid is going to get tried as an adult. He did get tried as an adult, and I went to her court and talked to her about, what we had found in that case study. And that was that, 70% of the kids recidivified into the adult system. Well, 70%, excuse me. But it was 80% that, were Hispanic. And I thought, man, this is really unfair for, indigent children and then single-parent moms to be targeted. Just really was dumbfounding, and for them to put indigent children whose moms are already struggling, living with dysfunction as it is, wasn't really fair. And, I really tried to push forward. And then, like I said, I asked God that day to grant me the power to end this or to eradicate, why we would ever alter a child's mind as far as what they did to my son. And, I've continued forward, and we had there at the Advocates worked on the PI approach, which is a contract that we have with the Bexar County Juvenile, being preventive intervention enrichment. And it was done by Jason Mata there, sort of modeled off of the Juvenile Detention Alternative Initiative that didn't get adopted. And to continue pushing forward and, to have to realize, that the young man's doing 25 to life and, meeting other advocacy groups. There was a young lady, Mrs. Mary Jane Martinez and Diane Ibanez, that were the founders of the Texas Families of Incarcerated Youth, also at the Cindy Taylor Crier Center, and this happened back in 2002. Her son was put on a psychotropic, and actually she doesn't know whether he was molested or not. She's fought, and she had gone to legislation, and she was there with Senator Hinojosa. When they ended the process by the Texas Youth Commission, that's when it became the Texas Juvenile Justice Department in 2007. And there was a group that came in this last session. 2013, I had advocated with Senator Leticia Vanderputte as to, what my son endured when he was put in restraints and isolation and almost died being put on a psychotropic called Prozac. Now, she took a bill, SB 1356, to the governor, and on September 1st, 2013, Governor Rick Perry, he signed that bill. And again, I thank God, I prayed and, tell him thank you, God, for ending, the torturing of our children in the Texas Juvenile Justice Department. And at that session, Governor Perry already, identified another issue that we had been pushing forward. Being a part of that review committee with the Department of Veterans Affairs 2012 suicide report, there was a bill that was done by State Representative Lois Colkhurst, and she authored HB 915. It was in the Texas foster care system. And in this bill, when I read the bill and to sort of try to find out what I wanted to ask Captain Hunter Smith, it identifies psychotropics as the cause of suicide. And I thought, like, finally, we're getting to the truth here. And so, we kept advocating and started working with, the Center for Healthcare Services, After the Battle, Save a Hero, Boy with a Ball, and it still was not being acknowledged. We tried to show Mr. Evans, he's one of the, I think he's the CEO or president of the ones that didn't want to say why our veterans are killing themselves. But when we had given them what the governor had signed, he still wouldn't acknowledge that it was the antidepressant that was causing, 22 servicemen every day are committing suicide. And that's why I have the ESP Project to try to get this adopted to where we can end veteran suicides and maybe shut off the school to prison pipeline. Because in the last session in 2014, there was a report that came in. It was done by the Council of State Governments. And in the report, it showed the state of Texas is having the highest rate of recidivism in all the United States. So after, doing the review on the report and trying to maybe bring that language into, the understanding of what we wanted to say with our case study. That case study in 2010 was actually a 70% recidivism rate, which would then mean that San Antonio, Texas, has the highest rate of recidivism in the United States. And, of course, I advocated from the west side. And, 80% of those kids are Mexicans. And I'm thinking, like, you guys have a process of justice against indigent children to sort of feed for that school to prison pipeline being, what we now have to accept as a private penal industry here in Texas. So we have a justice system that's not accepting our language because they didn't, we went to Senator Whitmire, we talked to Tara and Lawrence, and we went to Senator Menendez, and, nobody wanted to include what our case study showed in our assessment, as far as the cause of what and why, not just children, but veterans were committing suicide in America. And now with this report, this would be identified as what's causing the mass incarceration in America today. We're using antidepressants instead of finding a course to help make America prosperous. And then Governor signing that in 2013 as far as the restraints and isolation and also the antidepressants being identified. When we didn't get the case study, and I tried to advocate for my son because I had asked District Judge Mary Teresa Herr, if she can get the records to show what they did to my son, have him evaluated. He had been charged with a charge that was called robbery. He's taking somebody's food, but the attorney we hired, Mr. Jack Bytel, who ended up being disbarred, he had charged me $4,000 for a motion to quash the indictment, and it never got done. As to why, I still don't know. And some Tristan Doe ended up showing up as my son's attorney, and I tried to tell the judge that they all lied, but she had already did this. And on May 8th, 2012, I had asked her, when I had gotten my son out and gone with my son to court, if I could speak to the court, and she granted my request. And I had gone to there and asked her, if there's any way we can get more time, of course, to get another attorney for my son. I'm disabled, so she didn't give me more time. She gave me a court-appointed attorney, Mr. Price, and she did grant my request that my son be evaluated. And when we went to the evaluation in Judge Carruthers' court, there was no attorney there. So speaking with Dr. June, he had given my son some papers, and my son read them and handed it to me, and he says, "Dad, doesn't this mean we can get the records?" And it said on there, all instruments and past due treatment. I said, yeah. And when we asked the doctor, can they get the records from when he was at the Texas Juvenile Justice Department, he says, yeah, that's his right. And he said, I can't get it, your attorney has to get it. And then they told us that my son had another attorney, Mr. Tony Jimenez. And we went there and asked him, can you get the records? And he was very unprofessional. I've never had someone act that way towards me. And I said, I don't know you or as to why you're acting this way. But then I ended up finding out later as to my son's matter. And he had reset the evaluation without telling my son. And he told Judge Carruthers that he did notify my son. And at 9:30, the judge had no other option but to issue a warrant for my son for failure to appear. And 15 minutes later, I got a call from Brianna telling me that my son was being arrested at 9:45, and that he got processed by juvenile judge Laura Parker into the Bexar County Jail. I'm thinking like, wow, this is terrible, and I called a friend, and they made a couple calls, called me back, and said that it was Judge Carruthers. He issued a failure to appear. I got down to Judge Carruthers, and I think I made it down there about 10:05, 10:10, something like that. And I had asked to speak with the judge, and I was talking to his clerk, and I told her, the attorney lied to the judge. And the judge said, well, look and see if my son had ever missed any court dates, because he's had a mental problem and he's had some issues, but he's never missed a court date. He's been very responsible and, trying to work with what these psychotropics have done. He's had a baby, and he's just, was really, really trying hard. And the judge reinstated the bond, got my son out, and I went the next day, or, in January. I think this was in August, and I went in January to Judge Herr's court again and try to inform her of what actions, as far as this court-appointed attorney putting my son in harm's way, and put in a motion for my son to get stamped and taken to the judge to be heard. And she wouldn't hear it. She, when she called my son's case, she called a new case number and said, or asked the prosecutor and asked my son's court-appointed attorney if they were ready to go to court the next day. I'm thinking like, wait a minute, what are you talking about? We have a motion before you that the lawyer put you in harm's way. And she didn't hear it. And the next day when I came, there was a jury in the hall, and they came and told me, the sheriffs told me that if I go in, I would be arrested. And that's when the lawyer had brought Brittany Medellin, and that's my son's stepsister. And she started, yelling at my son because Martin had ended up getting killed in an accident, and that was my son's stepfather, and he was found a wrongful death lawsuit. He worked for him, and why the judge, or excuse me, the attorney had brought Brittany is dumbfounding to me, but they took the jury and everybody inside, and they told me I wasn't allowed, so I had gone to try to find some help because we had a motion before the court telling the court, and nobody was listening. So a friend of mine, Nicole Elizalde-Hending, she's an attorney, civil rights attorney, went to the judge's chamber and sent a letter to the judge, note to the judge, asking the judge, to understand that we didn't want to proceed with this attorney, that there would be circumstances over violating my son's constitutional right. Well, the judge sent a note back saying she's not going to hear it, she's going to continue. And they did. My son came out at lunch, we went to the church, I prayed with him, I told him, Nicole went to try to help, and I don't know how they're doing this. This is just dumbfounding. I'm trying to think, why would you have a trial in one day with someone we're telling you put my son in jail? And, we came back to the court, and my son went back in, and I was praying and just sitting there waiting for him to come back out. He came back out, and he wanted to hurry because he said that they tried to offer him a plea bargain to dismiss the case on the other case that they had put him in jail for. And they had offered him 2 years and told him, if he pleads guilty to the other case, they'll dismiss that case. Well, they dismissed that case because, they had the records, and his grandpa was there, I was there, his mom was there to testify, but they never took our statements, gotten anything for my son's defense. And, they dismissed the case, thank God. And why Judge Hurd did this is dumbfounding to me. Maybe you can call and ask her. Mary Teresa Hurd, she's in 186. And I don't think she's there anymore, as a matter of fact, so no, you can't do that. But maybe you can call the judge and ask them if they bring the records. That's what I'm going to try to do. To show what they were doing to children and what they did to my son. Well, in May, this was in January, March the 12th, which is tomorrow, 3 years ago. My son had my granddaughter, Aubrey Blue Castillo, and we stayed up all night with her. But that same day, he was in court with a visiting judge, and he tried to tell the visiting judge there was a motion before the court asking for a new attorney because this attorney, Tony Jimenez, had put my son in harm's way and had him arrested by lying to the judge. And he wasn't going to listen. He wasn't going to hear it. He asked to get a new lawyer, asked that, if we could reset this because he was going to have his daughter that day. And the judge, this Dick Acala, out of, I think it's El Paso or Eagle Pass, I think it was El Paso, said that they proceeded with the trial, and they called the jury, and, my son's getting no defense. And they kept him there, and he came running, because I had to take the baby to the hospital, and, I got her to the hospital, and he came running a little after 7, and they had Aubrey Blue, and that was, this is a beautiful little girl. I'll show you a picture of her here, but the next day, he stayed up all night with her and just, they would rock her there, and they stayed rocking, and, he asked me, what should we do, Dad? And I told him, if you don't really remember, because he didn't remember taking somebody's food. But he's had that problem since they put him on this Prozac, and that's why I was trying to get the records there. But this lawyer was, manipulating the courts as to, I don't know how this lawyer got the judge to have a trial in one day, but he did. And that's why I need you to call the district attorney, call the judge. I myself am going to march to Austin and ask the governor to meet with me. There's been a lot of things that have happened here, and I think it's time now. I had authored and written the ESP Project. When they didn't adopt or take our case study in the last legislative session, that showed that recidivism, and ours was to be on point of matter, it was because of the psychotropic. Not only in the juvenile, but also what we had did with our veterans. So I thought, Senator Whitmire did a bill, SB 1630, and in the bill, language read as to why he wasn't adding our case study as far as point of matter, but that there were indigent children. The report by the Council of State Governments was called Closer to Home. And in his bill, we need to start bringing resources and help groups before we go in. But for me, it would be a lot more simpler just to end the use of psychotropics causing, the chemical altering of indigent children's minds as to what he's saying. But they were using psychotropics, and they still are. We had in 2015, went to a riot in Giddings, Texas. And that riot in Giddings, the kids were on the roof, crying. They were surrounded. This was a war zone. There was DPS, Highway Patrol. They had the place surrounded. And then, like I said, the kids were on the roof. And, I started filming because they were threatening to commit suicide and jump off the roof. And they stayed up there almost till 4 o'clock. But while I was filming, some of the kids were sitting in a circle, and I'm thinking, man, these are children. I mean, we're at war in America with our children as a process of justice. And I'm thinking, like, this is really happening. It's bad enough they're using it to where they're causing the highest rate of recidivism in the United States and processing indigent children into the prison system as a part of justice. And they're continuing this. You know, I reached out to Lawrence Coleman, Senator Whitmire's office, and some of the parents had reached out because they're being charged with a crime and are probably going to get processed into the adult system after they were altered there. And we thought, well, maybe that could protect them. You know, if you show that you altered their mind, let's try to help those kids, you know what I mean? And, you know, we couldn't get them to meet with us or just even acknowledge it. And, you know, Senator Whitmire passed the bill, didn't take any of our case study. And, you know, it's so dumbfounding. I mean, these are children. It's my son. And that's why, you know, I'm here today, because we got to bring identity to of an unjust war in America. I mean, these are American children, but these are the children under the umbrella of the Texas Juvenile Justice Department. And when I called back to Senator Whitmire's office, you know, because the parents were asking us for help, and, you know, how can we stop these kids from being processed into the adult system? I mean, we got these little 17-year-old boys that are going to end up in an adult prison, something similar to what my son's enduring, and God only knows what's going to happen. But there was a ruling on December 17th, and it was MD versus Perry. And in that ruling by the children's rights advocates out of New York, the state of Texas was found guilty. And this was a ruling by U.S. District Judge Jackie Jacks. And in it, after, you know, it's a 255-page report, but it was vital, so after I had read it, in the language, the judge ruled that the Texas foster care system's use of psychotropics are making members of our society that won't be functional any longer. And I thought, does anybody here, you know, see what's going on? The cause of the mass incarceration in America is due to the uses of these psychotropics. I mean, we identified it with our veterans as to why they were killing themselves. Now we have a system in Texas, the Texas Juvenile Justice Department, that's still chemically altering children's minds. I had, like I said, called Senator Whitmire right there before Christmas and asked him, because we tried to get Senator Menendez here in San Antonio because of this being the highest rate, to defend the Mexican kids, and he would never answer the phone. I mean, we've called him since the end of the session. I've ran into him a couple of times. Maybe we can interim it. But I had sent him the lawsuit, MD versus Perry, and yeah, he did say they are committing a crime then in the Texas Juvenile Justice Department. But when I called, and why I'm here today, as far as, you know, this is really important, and when I called Senator Whitmire's office and Lawrence, you know, got on the phone, and I'd asked him, you know, as far as how do we find out if the kids were chemically altered, and you know, he said, and this is what the shocker was, that how do you expect us to control them? I thought, these are children, these aren't dogs. Well, you couldn't do it to a dog in America anyway. So, you know, this is my prayer to all y'all, and, you know, I hope you can call District Attorney LaHood. I'm going to march and try to take my language, my case study to the governor, you know, and I'm going to take them a plan to shut down the youth imprisonments in America. We're the ESP Project, and we're building America's future. I had, you know, posted on a show a while back, and if we don't somehow find a way to end this veteran suicide, we're Native Americans, and, you know, I've had this this vision of building an affordable housing project And I've reached over to Washington to try to talk to them in Washington to meet with the Native American Nations Council on the earthen component of the ESP project. Earthen blocks are manufactured here in San Antonio, and we have the R factors and can build an affordable house. Now, to partner with the state of Texas to end youth imprisonment in America and build the nets and the lifeline needed because of the use of psychotropics, not only with our children, but with our veterans. Our veterans will mentor these young men and women to become a prosperous member by building affordable housing. I'm going to send a communique to even our buddy there, Mr. Donald Trump. Looks like he might be the president. So instead of building a wall, the Native Americans would like to join partnership with President Trump, if he becomes the president, to build the ESP project, and that's earth and solar poly affordable housing along the border. We don't need a fence. Why don't we put some affordable housing down there and start building America strong? And that's sort of what our vision is on Remembering the 22 by Building America Strong. It's posted on YouTube, the ESP Project, Building America's Future, our children being mentored by veterans to end the injustice, the use of psychotropics. So God bless you, God bless America, God bless the indigent children of Texas. And I love you, son. I love you, ABC, okay? God bless.